Emily Carter had not planned to come back to Harbor Pine with a heavy heart. She told herself this trip was practical, necessary, and short. The old house by the lake had to be sold. Papers had to be signed. Memories had to be sorted and packed into neat boxes. That was the clean version of the truth she carried with her as she drove into town, watching the familiar trees line the road like silent witnesses. But beneath that clean story lived something quieter and harder to name. The town appeared exactly as it always had. The same wooden sign welcomed visitors. The same narrow streets curved toward the lake. The same calm hung in the air, untouched by the years Emily had spent away. She felt a strange mix of comfort and unease, like walking into a room that still remembered her even when she had tried to forget it. Emily parked near the water and sat in her car longer than necessary. Her hands rested on the steering wheel as her eyes traced the lake's surface. The water moved slowly, steady and patient. It did not care that 10 years had passed. It did not care that people came and left. It simply stayed. That thought stayed with her as she stepped out of the car and breathed in the familiar scent of pine and cold air. She walked toward her mother's old house, keys heavy in her pocket. Every step felt louder than it should have been. The house stood quietly, paint slightly faded but strong. When Emily unlocked the door, the soft sound echoed through empty rooms. Dust floated in the sunlight. The space felt paused in time, waiting for her to catch up. She moved from room to room without rushing. The living room still held the shape of old conversations. The kitchen still smelled faintly of coffee and early mornings. In her old bedroom, she stood still for a long moment. The walls were bare now, but she could still feel the weight of who she used to be there. A younger Emily, full of plans and feelings she did not yet understand. By late afternoon, the quiet became too loud. Emily needed air, movement, something. Outside herself, she grabbed her coat and walked toward the lake, telling herself she was just stretching her legs. But her feet already knew where to go. The marina came into view, and with it, a feeling she had hoped time would soften more than it had. Boats rocked gently. The sound of water touching wood filled the space between thoughts. Emily slowed her steps without realizing why. Then she saw him. Daniel Brooks stood near the marina office, talking with an older couple. He laughed softly at something they said, nodding with the same calm attention he had always carried. He looked older, yes, but not in a way that surprised her. Time had added quiet strength to his face instead of taking something away. Emily's chest tightened before her. Mind caught up. She had imagined this moment many times over the years, but none of those versions felt real now. This one did. Dale turned his head as if pulled by instinct, and their eyes met. Recognition passed between them instantly. No confusion. No doubt. "Emily," he said, her name gentle in his mouth. "Hi, Daniel," she replied, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. For a moment, neither moved. The world did not pause dramatically, but something slowed, just enough to be felt. The older couple smiled politely and walked away, leaving the two of them standing in the open space they once filled together so easily. "I heard you were back," Daniel said. Emily nodded. Just for a bit. He accepted that answer without pushing. That had always been one of his quiet strengths. They began walking side by side. Not too close, not too far. The dock stretched ahead of them, familiar and worn. They talked about simple things first. Daniel spoke about the marina, about how business stayed steady. Emily mentioned Seattle, her job, the city life she had built. Their words were careful but not forced, like stepping into water that was colder than expected but still familiar. As they walked, Emily noticed details she had once taken for granted. The way Daniel listened, really listened, without preparing his next words. The way he paused before speaking, as if giving his thoughts respect. She remembered how safe that had once made her feel. They reached the old bench by the lake. the one they had shared countless evenings on. Daniel stopped and smiled lightly. "Some things never change," he said. Emily followed his gaze. The bench was worn smooth by time and weather, but it stood firm. "No," she said, "they don't." They sat, leaving space between them. The lake reflected the sky, now shifting toward evening. Emily felt the pull of old memories, but noticed how different they felt now. Less sharp, less demanding. Like echoes instead of wounds. Daniel leaned back slightly. "I always thought you'd come back someday," he admitted. "Not as an expectation, just an observation." Emily swallowed. "I wasn't sure I would." Fell into a comfortable silence, one that did not ask to be filled. Emily realized she was not nervous. That surprised her most of all. Years ago, being near Daniel had made her feel exposed, like every emotion was too close to the surface. Now she felt grounded. As the light faded, Emily became aware of something else. Being here did not hurt the way she had feared. It didn't reopen old pain. Instead, it felt like touching a scar and realizing it no longer ached. Daniel stood first. "I should get going," he said. "But it was good to see you." "Yes," Emily said. It was. They parted without promises, without plans. Emily watched him walk away, noticing how the sight stirred something warm and familiar, but not overwhelming. It was different now. And she didn't yet know what that difference meant. As she walked back toward the house, the town lights flickering on around her, Emily understood one thing clearly. Harbor Pine had not changed. Daniel had not changed in the ways that mattered. But she had. And standing between what once was and what might never be again, Emily felt something shift inside her quietly, deeply, and without asking permission. The story was not over. It was simply waiting for its next truth. Emily stayed longer in Harbor Pine than she had originally planned. The days stretched before her like a ribbon, each one filled with small discoveries and quiet reunions. At first, she told herself she was being practical. There was paperwork to finish, repairs to oversee, and boxes of memories to sort. But soon she realized she was staying for another reason, one she did not want to name. Every evening, her steps led her to the lake, and there he was, Daniel Brooks. The same man she had loved so deeply, yet somehow different, shaped by years. That had passed. Their interactions began cautiously, like two dancers remembering old steps after a long pause. They shared coffee in the mornings, strolling through the small town streets, talking about everyday things, the new cafe that opened, the old bookstore that still held the same smell of worn pages, local events, and the quiet rhythm of life. That had not shifted much. They laughed at small jokes, shared memories lightly, but avoided the topics that once held the weight of their youth. And yet there was an undercurrent to every glance, a tension that spoke of feelings that had been long buried but never truly gone. Emily noticed the subtle ways Daniel had changed. His laugh now carried a soft calm. His eyes hinted at wisdom that came from enduring life's unexpected turns. He no longer hurried through conversations, nor did he seem impatient with silence. She found herself studying him, realizing that time had matured him, just as it had reshaped her. She wondered if he, too, had returned in memory many times, tracing the outline of what had been between them, imagining this reunion before it happened. The lake became their sanctuary. Each evening they walked along the shore, sometimes in silence, sometimes speaking in a quiet, tentative rhythm. Emily noticed how the water mirrored their emotions, sometimes calm, sometimes rippling with currents they did not discuss. One particular evening, the sun dipped low, painting the sky with oranges and soft pinks. Daniel stopped by the dock, leaning against the railing, staring at the water as if seeing something only he could perceive. Emily joined him, feeling a sense of intimacy that did not need words. They had once rushed into feelings, letting desire and uncertainty guide them. Now, years later, their connection had evolved into something quieter, deeper, and more understanding. 1. Afternoon, rain began to fall unexpectedly, trapping them inside the small lakeside cafe. The windows steamed, obscuring the view outside, leaving only the soft sounds of rainfall and muted conversations around them. Daniel stirred his coffee slowly, his fingers tracing the rim of the cup, and Emily watched him, noticing the lines around his eyes, the subtle gestures that spoke of the life he had lived. "I used to think that if something lasted long enough, it meant it was right," he said, his voice low, thoughtful. Emily leaned forward slightly, sensing the weight behind his words. "But now?" she prompted gently. He looked up at her, meeting her eyes with a sincerity that made her heart tighten. "Now, I think things don't always change. The place, the memory, the person, they stay. It's the feeling that grows older, wiser." His words hung in the air, soft yet profound. Emily nodded, realizing how true that felt. The lake, the bench, the town they had all remained unchanged. It was not the world that had shifted, but the way she and Daniel experienced it. Their feelings, once urgent and raw, had evolved. They had grown gentler, more considerate, carrying depth instead of demand. The week passed swiftly, each day carrying a rhythm that was both comforting and bittersweet. Emily found herself sharing stories she had never told anyone, speaking of fears, joys, and regrets with a candid honesty she had once reserved for Daniel alone. He listened, not as a judge or advisor, but as someone who understood the weight of time and the softness of human vulnerability. In return, he shared fragments of his own life, moments of triumph and disappointment, quiet victories, and subtle losses. They spoke of dreams that had changed course, of paths that life had forced them onto, and of choices that had felt impossible at the time. Yet, in every word, there was no resentment, only reflection and understanding. Their connection deepened. Without ceremony, a shared glance at the right moment, a gentle smile across the table. The unspoken comfort of proximity, these became the language they used to communicate what words could not fully express. Emily realized that this was different from the love they had known as teenagers. It was calmer, more patient, and profoundly respectful. There was no need for frantic declarations or urgent promises. There was simply recognition of what had been, an acknowledgement of what still lingered. As Emily prepared to leave, a mixture of sadness and clarity settled over her. The town, the lake, and Daniel himself had not changed. What had changed was how she felt about it all. The longing that had once kept her awake at night had transformed into a quiet appreciation. She understood that some connections do not demand action, that some loves exist to shape us rather than possess us. On her final evening, they returned to the dock, standing side by side in silence. Stars reflected on the water, and the gentle lapping of the waves felt like a heartbeat in sync with their own. "I leave tomorrow," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel nodded, his expression calm, carrying an unspoken acceptance. "I know," he replied. They stood close enough to feel each other's presence, yet far enough to preserve the space they had grown into. Emily realized that she did not need promises. She did not need assurances or plans. Some connections were meant to be held in memory and present awareness, not bound by expectation. She smiled softly, acknowledging the complexity of their relationship, the beauty of what remained between them, and the depth of feelings that had changed without fading. The night deepened, and Emily felt the bittersweet satisfaction of understanding. Harbor Pine remained the same, the bench remained the same, and Daniel remained just as he had always been. Yet the feeling she carried had changed completely. It was no longer about loss, regret, or unfinished business. It was about acceptance, gratitude, and the quiet joy of a connection that had endured time and distance. Growing wiser and gentler along the way, driving away the next morning, Emily felt a sense of peace she had not expected. She looked back. Once, seeing the lake shimmering under the morning light, Daniel standing quietly in the distance. Their story was not about rekindling what had been, Nor was it about closure in the traditional sense. It was about understanding the enduring power of feelings and how they transform. How love and connection can shift shape without ever truly disappearing. Emily knew she would carry this with her forever: the town, the lake, the man who had shaped her youth, and the profound lesson that time changes the way we feel, even when everything else remains the same.